Hello, and welcome back to JEHC, the Jason Elvis Herdcast. This is episode 4. And today I've got Jack Fisher here with me.
How's it going, everybody?
Yeah, he's going to be joining the discussion as well.
Yeah, time to be on camera. Back to you.
Yeah, and we're going to have a discussion today on the Discovery Channel's Twin Turbos deal that we did with the Debertis. Now, this is a Toyota Tacoma build. Although the only thing that was stock was the fucking cab, but this was done for a SEMA project for twin turbos on Discovery Channel with the Deberti. So that's Doug and Brad. Doug's the father, Brad's his son. And so Jack and I own Tekk Consulting INC, and we do this type of stuff constantly. Like there's these sort of SEMA-esque projects. I don't know how to classify them other than calling them SEMA-esque projects because they're more promotional based than they are specifics in like the racing environment or industry. And we do quite a few of these with different OEMs involved and things like that. And if you walk around SEMA and stuff, there's definitely things we've designed in all of those types of avenues. The vast majority of that we unfortunately cannot disclose, showcase, or do anything other than what our clients would prefer because we are under NDAs and a level of respect is held for each endeavor and each client. And when they would prefer that nothing leaves that side of the table, we cannot post it. We cannot talk about it. We obviously can't put it on a podcast, get fucking sued, or any of that bullshit, or more importantly, deteriorate our reputation as holding that line. So the best way to understand that is simply put that if you visit the Tekk Consulting Incorporated Instagram, that is going to be all things that we have permission to disclose that we designed for. But with that said, it is not uncommon for builders, OEMs, blah, 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 to hire outside guns, so to speak, to come in and do the things that they are expertise in to some degree. Now, in this avenue, it would be chassis suspension, which is what we do day in and day out, all day long, every freaking day, and have for years. So it's not my first SEMA-esque build. It's just one that we can disclose. So we're going to do some reviewing on all the tidbits and go over a bunch of cool stuff. There's also a lot of other builds I can't discuss, which, whatever. It is what it is. That comes with the territory. So with no further ado, let's dive into... you can bring this over to here, Jack. So this is Tekk Consulting. This is our firm. And this is what Jack and I consider our 9 to 5 to some degree, what we do on a daily basis. We design for builders, race teams, OEMs like this BS, and privateers. So guys that want to do like really gnarly projects by themselves. Obviously, these are wealthy individuals who have like a vision or a dream, and we complete it in the computer. In the avenue with the Debertis, and let's get some background on that. So let's go to Instagram. This is Brad Deberti, and if you're in the off-road industry, car industry, most likely you've heard of Brad. I mean, he's done a lot of cool stuff, and he has a decent reach. So for the most part, like you've at least heard his name if you haven't met him. Super fucking nice guy. Working with the Debertis was a great experience. Not all of these sort of endeavors are great for guys in our avenue, i.e. the designers. Usually we get like the shit into the stick, unfortunately, when it comes to these style of builds. But the Debertis were fucking rad from like start to finish. And the one thing too to mention is like, I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, so this is Brad, and he's doing like kind of what like his dad did to some degree, because like his dad was obviously a generation above us. I'm closer to Brad's age. And his dad was a builder, very famous builder, did a ton of cool shit for many, many years with big OEMs, SEMA builds, just rad shit, and did really well with it. So he's no stranger to any of this type of foolery. But, he's kind of, I don't know, I guess Brad just kind of picked it up and ran with it to some degree. So they've just been going crazy with tons of stuff. And on this specific project, and let's bring it up. So what we were brought in to do was design the chassis and suspension for the performance truck. The performance truck is a extended cab Tacoma which I'm sure you guys have seen some videos. So here's it. And it's called the performance truck because it was designed to incorporate a few different facets of what Brad wanted in relationship to like drifting, some rallycross stuff, and then some road racing stuff. So we kind of had to design something that would fit those platforms. Now, we didn't design anything to adhere to a specific racing sanction because that wasn't necessarily a requirement, although it did have to be very safe at speed. And this thing is very capable of speed, and we'll get into that too. But the point of this was just something rad that was going to be debuted at SEMA. And, under the Toyota banner, TRD banner, with Alcon brakes and a bunch of other people involved. And so I'm sure you've seen this truck. It was the 2019 SEMA. It was debuted. And we did all the filming and stuff for the show in, when was that?
Yeah, it would have been the summer and August of 2019 because we were originally.
When did you first show up at Deberti's? Because I think you showed up there before me.
That would have been March, and we met up there for a morning so actually they were filming the show for like the first day we showed up because they wanted to incorporate the whole design process into it.
Yes.
So part of the show, they went and picked up the Tacoma, had it all stripped and ready. We showed up that morning. They filmed us, driving in, per se. And then it was the entire take from, spraying the truck down with developer, 3D scanning it. It was just a stripped cab at that point. And
we'll get into more detail on that. But I'm just saying, timeline wise.
So yeah, it was about
mid 2019 range is when we were handed this project for SEMA of 2019.
Well, I think it was like it was basically first quarter 2019 because after that first day of filming, we had to have tubes off to laser like within a week to keep up with their deadline.
Yeah,
it was a very very accelerated design process.
So that is one of the facets of some of these builds, especially when you're beholden to the TV. The production deadlines accompanied by the SEMA backing with, I guess a way to put it would be sponsorship agreements. And so when these sort of promotional builds are done, the Debertis are no different than the other guys that are doing this type of stuff in the fact that they have obligations that they have with sponsors, et cetera, to do certain things, promotional events, certain types of media, especially these days with the social media. These obligations they try to fulfill, and like for obvious reasons, if the truck's not done or not capable or performance is lacking in certain departments, then these obligations aren't met, and it would make the Debertis look really bad, And so everybody along that ladder, so to speak, has to have their shit together. Otherwise, like they look like fucking retards, and like we can't have that because then. If we look like fucking retards, in other words, Jack and I, that downhill effect is in the Debertis could. And for obvious reasons, you don't want that to happen in anyone's eyes, whether it's a production company, the OEMs that they're dealing with, et cetera, et cetera. You want everything to be done in the time frames and done appropriately, and everyone to understand what's realistic in the time frames and things like that to make sure that all of this stuff is met. And the Debertis did a good job of that, especially with all the stuff they were juggling for the TV show and all the bullshit for that specific SEMA event. And we were brought in for multiple aspects. We did this Tacoma. I think that same time frame we did stuff for the other trucks.
Yeah, so they had a
sliding drawer.
They had an F450 that was going to be like the super hauler. Yeah. And they were filming all of this stuff for the TV show. So as kind of like a start to it, once we came in and started working on the performance truck, when they realized that they could really offload like a lot of the work, and then we would be able to do the design work and the leg work per se, and then they would be able to just put it together because they had a plasma table inside their shop. It really opened up a lot more avenues. So
we'll review their shop. They had a badass.
Yeah, they had a
Doug was not fucking around. He knew exactly what to do to get the job done.
Well, so I think they really. So the performance truck was taking what they had done in season 1, the drift truck, and then increasing it by like at least a factor of 3. So the drift truck was the Chevy Silverado lowered, widened, pretty standard, not really many body modifications. It still had the frame rails. Like, it was really just a built up, lightened, turned into a drift truck with twin turbos and everything on it.
It was not a tube chassis vehicle by any means. Yeah.
Not a tube chassis. And then that still took them. I think they had a good idea for how much time in building it took for them to do that. And I think they realized, like, if they were to make every single tube by hand to do something as crazy as the performance truck, that it was going to take too much time, considering how many builds they had stacked for the season.
I don't think it's an equation of whether or not they can do it. I think it was an equation of more that they have these 10 things to do for these projects, and if they can get us to chunk off one or two of these, it relieves a lot of their time to get the other stuff done, while simultaneously still moving forward on all the other stuff. So I think there's a few factors, as opposed to, like, in theory they could not do this. Of course they could do this, but to do this in the time frame while they were, extending themselves out and all the other stuff. So long story short, in a lot of these applications that Jack and I, Tekk Consulting Inc. gets hired for, isn't necessarily because we can do the design and nobody else can to some factor. It's because we can get it done within the certain parameters and certain aspects to make sure all this other stuff is held, because these other obligations, I mean, this is a whole different party than just us designing something for an individual who has specifications. Like, we're beholden to production schedules. We're beholden to...
I mean, the day we showed up there guys who normally would have been working on building the performance truck were building the third vehicle they took to SEMA that year, which was that Ford Econo van.
Yes,
with
the lowered van.
Yeah, the lowered van, Hellcat engine, on bags, like... So all their guys were tied up building that custom vehicle on top of doing the entire performance truck, which was even, way more fabrication compared to that van.
Yeah. So in those situations, that's where stuff like we come into play to come and do the design development of the chassis suspension, because we can get this stuff done. We've done so much of it that when I'm laying this stuff out, it's very quick, easy, and just the experience. And we're going to dive into some of that too as we move forward. But, to get, and to show what we're referring to, like, here's the TV show that was on Discovery Channel for 2 seasons. That is Doug, that's Brad. Brad's done a bunch of racing and a ton of other shit too. Like, he did pretty well in short course racing. So he's in the off-road industry. He's in other industries. He's done some rallycross stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's on Discovery Plus. Go check it out. Any of that party. Here's the Instagram for Twin Turbos. You can see, and they just did this truck this last SEMA.
The C10 Slayer.
Yes. But here's one of the other things that Jack designed this.
So in this case, they wanted to take the Transformer truck that they did in season 1, which was the full trace truck, but it, with the bed sides lifting up, it made it look like your standard, it had the standard truck look with the chase truck or support truck storage capacity. So this was kind of like a modernized version of that, where the rear tray, what would normally hold the spare tire, became a full slide-out box that had a decent amount of capacity. I mean, it was like a 48-inch deep drawer. And then the tire still mounted to the bottom. We retained that stock feature. And then the actual bed sides were turned into storage drawer as well. Well, not the bed sides per se, but the actual fender wells above the dual rear wheels. So those had 3 containers inside of them that were like aluminum. It was an entirely aluminum case, and it was fully protected from the wheel well per side, so fully boxed in, and then the entire bed side would slide out about 6 inches. And then they had all their straps and everything that you would need for towing stored in it. So they did that build in addition, which had a full bagged rear, had a full bag suspension so that you could adjust the lift in the truck to balance out with the trailer. And then they loaded all 3 of their vehicles, so the performance truck, the van, and one other, and drove them all to SEMA.
I don't remember what the other... But yeah, they had multiple vehicles that year, 2019 SEMA, and different booths and bullshit. So they were a little bit stretched on that one.
Yeah.
I don't know, if that was the first time they had that many vehicles or what. I'm sure Doug has done a ton of stuff, like, obviously before your time, etc. So there's a good possibility that they've had other SEMAs where they had just as many or more vehicles. So we don't know that part of it. But the point being is we were brought in to as hired guns to come and kick ass in this. And so we can start with some of the process and things like that. And so here's the final product, that was the finished truck. So mega body kit, etc. Now this is a complete tube chassis. The only thing that's stock is the cab. And so I had to design the suspension, the chassis, and all that to fit this cab while still maintaining the specifications that they had asked for.
And fitting 3 seats.
Yeah, 3 seats. And they still wanted a certain drift specifications. They still wanted some of the road racing adjustability. And they still wanted it to be robust enough to have some like rallycross-esque stuff done as well. Or at least the ability to drive it in that fashion without it, basically fucking grenading itself. And so there was a little bit of a challenge on top of the time frame and the other bullshit. But let's go through some of that.
There's those 3D printed front canards.
Yeah, but let's start with. I'm trying to remember where the photos are of you when we were there first, like doing the scanning and stuff.
Yeah.
So let's see. So this is the tube chassis stuff, and I'll go through a little slower. I just want to look for some stuff to start. But yeah, it's holy crap. That is a photo of me and Doug. That is interesting. I didn't even know that was in there. I want to find, because what we had to do was to scan this thing, we had to here's a cool shot. Let's show you this real quick. So this guy is the truck. So you can see right here, this is the overall, and all this had to be designed in a very short time frame, and without this cab from the factory. So the Toyota engineers were, to put it politely, reluctant to send us the cab. So we just 3D scanned it. Joke's on them. So the Debertis bought a brand new Tacoma, tore it apart, and we just 3D scanned it. So, this is years ago. We've been doing this 3D scanning stuff for a while, and full like cab scans for a while. I don't know too many people in the industry that are able to do that. I mean, maybe there's some guys doing that now, but we were doing full vehicle scans years ago. And this is a perfect example where we didn't want to waste our time. So we scanned the cab and drew the chassis and designed everything as fast as we could because we had a deadline. So this is a motor we scanned. So that the motor itself is a actual cup motor. So what they had sent us was a Toyota cup motor that we were not allowed to open up, not allowed to remove anything, and we were allowed to scan as is, and that's only, they obviously don't want us to be looking at any of the, some of the secrets and stuff they're putting in these cup motors, which is totally fine because, I don't give a shit. I'm not a motor guy. I have even if I opened it up, I wouldn't be able to tell you shit from fuck on half of the stuff that has to do with why that motor is so badass. But it's gnarly. So we scanned that cup motor.
It was like naturally aspirated, 10,500 RPM max. And
yeah,
it's 1,000 horsepower?
No. I want to say like 7 and change, maybe 800 range.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's a cup motor, so it's a standard deal per se. But we have to make that fit in this truck with all the other bits. And
it was tight.
Yeah, and I will get into that. Let's see here. So let's go through some of the I gotta find the one with rear bulkhead, front bulkhead, rear dash, 3 printed canards, rear sway bar, tube frame. Which one is this one? I think that's the tube frame one that I opened. The canards we can talk about in a minute. Front suspension. I remember there were photos.
Well, yeah, it was like the cab cut open, sitting on blocks with just a bunch of powder all over it.
There definitely was. I don't remember where that ended up. Maybe it's under the no, because that's just the sway bar stuff. Anyways, we're gonna start with tube frame then. That's where we'll go. Now that we've already burned like 5 fucking minutes. So, as we were speaking about earlier, we started with a cab. So, this was the scan of the cab, and what we did is we cover this bad boy with some diffuser, which takes down the reflectiveness of the cab and allows you to scan it a lot smoother and easier. So we paint that whole bad boy with diffuser. We don't use diffuser anymore. We have other tricks now, but back when this was scanned years ago, that was the case. Now, the trick to doing these sort of cages and assemblies is you always scan it with one side door on and one side with the doors off. And what that allows you to do is you have a good representation of spatial constraint for the door stuff and vice versa. And so you can kind of see some of this, and Jack can elaborate on it because he did draw these tubes. He did the actual CAD work on these tubes. I just do the layout, so to speak, or tell him what to do layout-wise, but the actual drawing of the tubes Jack handled.
Yeah, so as pictured here, we've got the auto surface of the scan, and a little fun fact about it, the hardest surface to 3D scan is gloss black, but they like the gloss black cab because it's the easiest to do whatever color you want on the outside and have a pretty neutral working point on the inside. So, it was definitely a rushed program. So, I mean, as soon as we had the scan file done from processing, I was then able to get it in, start mocking up tubes before the scan had auto surfaced overnight because I needed to pass UBAC stuff. Because when we design these large CAD models, we're passing files back and forth constantly. So he might start out with some layout mock-up and that, okay, this is how wide, you wanted the 2x3 frame from where you wanted to like match the bulkheads up to. But then I had to take that and be like, all right, these are one dimension, but now I have to match it up to the scan so that the 2x3 is sitting right, just touching inside the pinch welds, because they then wanted to take the pinch welds, weld that to the bottom 2x3 square, and then start dropping round tubes that fit the cab. So, I mean, the overall layout was like a pretty standard, in terms of safety-wise, like how we drew the car. But a lot of time was spent having to manipulate, add bends. Nothing was rolled in this specific application, but adding bends to tuck it as tight as possible. Because in an extended cab, there's barely any room for really two people when you put a full safe, tube frame inside of it.
Well, the Tacomas aren't terrible.
Three.
It's not like it's a Ford Ranger, which is tiny, per se. These aren't horrible. But yeah, so go back to this. So what Jack was kind of starting off to say is, so when I do these SEMA-esque projects or projects that are these sort of promotional stuff, we kind of don't really follow to some degree the guidelines for some of the sanctioning bodies. We're kind of doing our own thing, and I've done a bunch of these types of builds in this promotional field-esque tube chassis environment. And what I have found over the years is we have two routes to go. One is we get a platform and a base that is very straightforward and easy to work with and build from. And that allows us to get stuff moving very quickly and done accurately. Or we're going to be doing it more of like what we would do with the high-end builds for a builder or a race team, etc., where we have the luxury of a little bit more time consumption. We have the luxury of significant more chassis tooling and fixturing. So with that said, there's reasons why this chassis is designed the specific way it is. So I don't want to hear this bullshit about like, oh, you guys put a fucking square down and blah, blah. There's a reason for all of this, and it's very specific. It has to do with time consumption, it has to do with safety, and it has to do with accuracy. It is very easy to design a square base for the cab. So we take, some of these pictures it's hard to see, but this drip rail is kind of the starting point. Oh, here you go. Here's the square tube. coming into it. So we start with a square. This square is 2x3 120 wall material. It is technically mild steel. This is all going to be MIG welded, no problem. And so what this allows us to do is create a super simple base, and you can see it in here, this square base that they can plop onto a very simple rail fixture and start building up from there. It's quick, it's simple, and it gets the job done. Like I said, if we were going to be doing something far more fancy, etc., we would obviously have a much more elaborate type of chassis. So when it comes to like, oh, why did you just put a fucking square in there? It's that, like, this is all done for a reason. And it's done this way because of the time constraints. It's done this way because we don't have extensive chassis tooling and fixturing. So it makes it very easy to build these squares and start from there. And we just have it, like Jack was just mentioning, is the square tube fits up against that side rail of the cab. So we just tuck that bad boy right there. So they just slip the cab right over it. And then the tubes just start plopping in from that square up. And then we just start lacing everything in accordingly. So what this allows us to do with like these SEMA-esque builds and things like that is go from zero to chassis really fucking quick. And so that's why it's done this way. That's, if you look at the back half here, this is very simple square tube that is notched. Now, all of these were CNC notched from the CAD files that Jack drew. So it goes together like an erector set really easily. And mind you, they didn't have a lot of time to build this. This has to be done accurately and has to be done quickly. So those are some of the tricks that we use in sort of these SEMA-esque builds to get us to our goal faster. And this truck is incredibly straight and accurate too, because we're starting with, see, here's your square tube base. You know,
we didn't even know they were going to have like that chassis table to build on. So when we showed up with all the tubing,
no, we did. That was discussed when I did. That's exactly why it was done this way, because I knew you can set that square on those two main rails. What we didn't know was whether or not he was going to be able to do that back piece, which that we cut on the fly. That was the one. That was what they didn't have.
Right.
Remember,
well, I mean, I was taking,
I
was at their shop, like taking down the measurements of their table and drawing out a couple like basic 2D fixturing templates that they could do just to help hold it centered.
Which was done, you know, very quickly on the fly, as opposed to we're doing extensive chassis tooling like we have done with race vehicles and other chassis, so to speak, as opposed to these sort of, you know, get things done now SEMA build mentality. So this square frame is the starting point. Then the back comes up from there. And then we end up adding removable sections down the road. And I think we can show that. We got pictures somewhere on that. But all of this material, the tubing itself is all 4130. It is all 095. We did that so that that was a request from Brad to MIG weld everything. So in those situations, even though this square is mild steel, all the tubing is 4130, 095, and MIG welded together. It's totally fine, plenty safe enough. This truck is definitely safe enough and an at-speed rollover, 100 miles an hour, etc. So we're not concerned about that one bit. And so, yeah, you can kind of see in here. Let's see if we can find. Yeah, there's a very angry me picture. I don't remember what that was going. I probably wasn't mad. That's just resting bitch face. But yeah, you can kind of see right here what Jack was referring to. This square tube is tucked up against this drip rail. And so that gives us a really fucking good starting point and a really good base to just start designing. Here we go. Here's another good picture. Designing everything up from there. And here's a picture of one of the removable sections that goes in. So after the chassis is together, we put in these removable sections. One underneath the trans and then one underneath the rear drive shaft. You can kind of see in this picture, here's some good pictures of how it's tucked. Jack drew all these tubes. None of them are rolled, they're bent tubes. So there's multiple bends to fit the cab. It's another trick, which I can allow him to elaborate on. I just need to find a better picture. Here's kind of, you can kind of see the square tube coming through the scan. So to speak, you can see what we had to work with to some degree. Here's your starting base. Here's a good image. So this is that square tube that I was talking about. This is our fundamental base. And I'd like to do a lot of these SEMA projects like this. We're going to do a video on another one we're allowed to disclose, and that was the Forsberg Nissan. And you'll see some similarities in how I set up the chassis for that. Because of time frame, because of lack of significant chassis tooling, things like that, these are tricks that we can utilize to help make a very safe, straightforward, and accurate platform from the start. So don't be afraid of using square tube like that in these situations. It's totally fine. Here's another good shot where you can see the square tube base coming through, and the square tube is what we used for the starting point of the front and rear bulkheads. I'm trying to find a shot of that A-pillar jack.
I mean, that photo of the tubes there isn't too bad, but...
there was one where you could see it much better.
Yeah, kind of in there.
There's just we have several folders of pictures. Here's the good one. So yeah, go ahead and Jack can elaborate on what he did in some of this.
Kind of what you're seeing there is, my goal whenever I'm trying to fit roofs to a tube is to have the tube be as far away from the occupant as possible. So in this case, where like the Tacomas, the front of the Tacomas are a very subtle curve. You can't fit it with like a straight tube in a single bend and not have it showing. And the goal
one side or the other.
Yeah, and one side or the other. And the goal's to have it hidden. So the kind of trick to that is to essentially add bends where you can incorporate it with other structures so that you don't have a unsupported point that could potentially hit in a section where it's not adequately supported. Because, anywhere that you add a bend can be not as ideal as a straight tube. You're strain working that entire bend section. So it's part of why I don't like rolls. And in this instance, we hadn't really developed the CNC rolling well enough to guarantee
the suppliers were not.
Yeah. It's really come a long way in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
for those kind of things.
The supply chain of CNC rolled tubes, when this truck was done in mid 2019, was mediocre at best.
Yeah.
And we can't, like I said, in these time frames and these sort of builds, like we can't fucking risk that shit. We have one chance to fucking cut this thing and get it in. We can't fucking wait for the jerk off of multiple rounds of tubes coming through for one fucking A-pillar to be right. Like, these things have to be done.
Because it was a 2-week turnaround from we scanned the cab to you showed up with the tubes and plate work ready to go.
And this was done, the tubes were done by Cal West.
Yes.
Yes, if I remember correctly. So they did do that in the few week turnaround time.
Yeah,
and as you can see, it went together.
Yeah. So, and we tried to keep it as simple as possible. So where the bends were as good as I could add a bend and tuck it as tight as possible just so you couldn't see it. And then we would adjust it based on where we wanted the A-pillar cross tube to go. And then a couple of the things that we did differently than, like your A-pillar support tube did not go up to the A-pillar. It went up
No, it's on the A-pillar. Well, it's just done in a fashion that's more like a rally car per se.
Correct.
Because we had certain specifications from Brad on the feel from the interior of the truck. He wanted it to be more rally car-esque.
Yeah, and also have space. If it had come up to, if the A-pillar support tube was on center with the A-pillar cross tube, it would have been you would have felt it on your arms because of kind of where the cab was sitting. Where they wanted to put the seats, the A-pillar support tube would have essentially been going right through the middle of the seat. And then if you try to get in and out of the truck, there would have been a tube in the way. That was part of why it had to be pushed forward as well. Considering that, this truck had 3 full race seats inside of it, and the third seat was positioned between them in such a manner that to get into the third seat, you had to crawl over either the driver or passenger seat just to be able to get into it.
Yeah, coming back to this main screen. Yeah, so what he's referring to is this is the A-pillar support tube right here. Obviously, the A-pillar is tucked in this guy. You can kind of see it on the other side of the vehicle, so the passenger side. And everything was trimmed. All the stock sheet metal gets trimmed out of this because we tucked the tubes all the way up, maximum head clearance like Jack was saying, so we can maximize our space constraint for both safety and looks. If you're going to be caging a vehicle like this and you don't trim the sheet metal out, let's be crystal clear, you're a fucking amateur. You shouldn't be doing this. Get the fuck out of this industry. This is not a lot of time, and this is not just professional, but you're getting that tube and material a few inches further away from the occupant's head, and that's a fucking mile, when it comes to safety. So if you're not doing this, I'm sorry, but you're an amateur. You're a joke. You need to learn. You need to fucking get your shit together, because you're not going to be taken seriously by any builder or any designer if you're not legitimately cutting all of the material out of the cabs and tucking all the tubes up to where they're literally touching the fucking outside skin. You know, if you're not doing that, you're a joke. Welcome to the Thunderdome, but this is the harsh reality. And guys like me will make fun of you all day long and fucking laugh in your face because you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Not to mention, like I said, the safety aspect. People can get fucked up in these vehicles. Brad's a pretty good driver, but God forbid, shit gets sideways and he does get this thing end over end, and he does take this truck well above 100 miles an hour. Your straps stretch, your body moves, your seats move. You need these tubes as far from your helmet as humanly fucking possible. So if you can gain 2 inches of space between your helmet and that tube, that could be 2 inches. That's a big difference between knocking you the fuck out or causing significant more injury, even with a helmet on or a lat or any of the other bullshit devices. Like, you could still hit the tubes. The tubes aren't going to move, but that'll fucking destroy your helmet. That'll fuck you up, and that happens. So if you hit the interior of the truck, like, you're in a world of hurt, especially at speed.
Well,
so,
I think the highest speed they've taken this thing up to is like 155.
Yeah, and my point being is, if you don't take the extra work to trim the cab out properly and put these tubes in, I mean, you can see it up here too. It's everything is tucked to where it's, we took out all the stock sheet metal and put everything up there. That's how it's done properly. Do not do it any other way. Do not be lazy and leave the stock sheet metal. Do not tuck the A-pillars and things like that. You could save your fucking buddy's life, whoever you want to call it, your own life. These are the proper ways. This is how it's done professionally. So there's your little rant on the people who do that improperly, so to speak.
Well, I mean, if you ever want to judge it, if you're sitting in your mid-sized pickup truck, just, if you're 6 feet tall or whatever, literally just put your hand above your head and just feel the gap between
it's pretty
the headliner.
Fucking close. Yeah.
And then imagine there's, a 2-inch or 1.75-inch tube taking up that space between the stock interior of the truck and your head.
It's be lights out real quick, because like I'm saying, the straps, the harnesses, no matter how tight you get those seats, they all flex. Your body flexes. You will move several inches in an event of a rollover, no matter how fucking hard you have those shoulder belts on. So with that said, we keep going. So that is your A-pillar support that I just showed you. Right here, this is our A-pillar support. Again, we're going with the Rally S style. That's why our door bars were in this fashion. Here is our B-pillar, and then our C-pillar is tucked back there. Because again, we have a third occupant, and we'll show you that in a second. So then we have an X coming back that transfers load. These tubes are touching in the center, and that transfers load down to these critical points that all tie in to the main frame and chassis with the C-pillar. So it's all structured appropriately in the event of an at-speed rollover. We then transfer some of that load coming out back here to the back of the frame and obviously down. Now this, we just run a standard slip. So it's, I believe this is 1.75-inch material to 1.5 inches, if I remember correctly. It was not 2-inch for the A-pillars. It was 1.75. The only 2-inch, I think, was the square and the floor.
Yeah, it was 1.75 for all the main tubes.
Yes, 1.75, 0.95 to 1.5 inch. So there's a little bit of a space. That's fine in these aspects. This tube comes in a little bit. There's a plug weld you can't see, and then they just burn all this up with the MIG gun. All 4130, plenty stout enough if there was ever an issue. Here's a great shot of what we were referring to. This is the fucking, stock sheet metal right there, and this is our square tube starting point. And they just fucking stitch welded it right there. This is how tight everything is tucked.
And it lets you keep the stock doors. Because
this did run stock doors, that's right. We
saver.
scanned that. That's what I was referring to by keeping that scan appropriately. Here's another great shot of that. So again, we're built, these trucks are designed from the ground up. The way I like to do these SEMA or promotional type projects is in this fashion so that we don't incur a ton of extra time, a ton of extra cost in certain aspects of tooling and fixturing and things like that. Now, to be perfectly clear, if I was building like a race truck, we would probably be doing this a little different per se, and we had a little bit more time and budget involved. Because you have to remember, this is still as a budget. Even though it's the Debertis and it's a Discovery Channel show and things like that, everything has a budget. You have to adhere to the budget. You can't just blow that shit way the fuck out of the water and then expect them just to be like, whatever. So this is why it's designed in a fashion so they can get this shit done ASAP, so to speak, and also so that they don't fucking die if they do roll it over. Like, let's be crystal clear. Safety is still number one whenever I'm doing any of these vehicles. That's what our reputation is based on. We have had clients actually fuck their shit up, and we haven't had any clients have major injuries from any of the, I guess you'd say, design of the chassis stuff. You know what I mean? Like rollovers and things like that.
There were a couple fun features about doing it this way, though, is that, as you can see here, the entire trans drive shaft, all of that was kept above the
floor, so
above
to speak.
the floor.
Yes. But that was also that's all what Brad wanted, because
of course
he wanted it to basically be one big fucking skid plate underneath.
Yep.
For the rallycross-esque mentality.
Yeah, take a lowered truck, drive it off road. You're gonna be hitting stuff.
Yeah. And this section is removable. It's hard to see right here, but there are some bolts that go in. So this little drop-down piece actually can unbolt and come out to make some of this a lot easier to deal with to some degree.
With an absolutely massive radiator in the back.
Yeah. So here's another good shot. You can see of all the tubes being tucked. All the stock sheet metal was cut out. Here's our B-pillar, our door bar. Now, obviously, these are all in-process picks. None of these are final picks. Here's the ceiling.
Yeah, they fully plated it in, too.
Yep. They did a good job on that. So here's some of the stuff that Jack was referring to with tucking the tubes and getting it. Interesting fact, I don't have the image on this. I think it might be on our Instagram.
Probably.
Of the stalker laid over the fucking, when we finally got the stock one.
All tubes were cut and welded together, and then we were sent the stock cab as like a comparison, which was a lot of fun because we were able to bring in the stock CAD file, which wasn't even fully a CAD file. It was a scan file. So like they sent us a surface mesh, which I was able to auto surface and overlay on top of our scan and be like, look at that. Basically 1-to-1.
It was an OEM file. It was not a scan file.
No. What I'm saying is they didn't actually send us like, the parametric OEM files. They sent us STL of the exterior bodywork. So it was just the exterior skin with the rear bed and front.
But it would be like their stamping file.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know. It might have literally been like the.
In other words, it's not a scan.
No.
You said it was a scan. Well, it's not a scan.
I'm saying it was a mesh file.
What we had was a scan.
So when I took their mesh file, compared that to the 3D scan, it essentially lined up close enough for what you'd expect would be the tolerances from all the stampings and all that.
I'm still
shot to the room cam.
But yeah, we had I had taken the stock file and put that with the scan file that we did to demonstrate like how bitchin' the scan was. Here's a rad shot. This is the scan file, to be fair. And here's again, you can see the underpinnings of the chassis and kind of how I start this and how I lay this out to make this easier on them. Here's the removable section that I was talking about. So they cut that tube out here and here once the chassis is together and add these removable sections for the drivetrain stuff. And it's a style that I incorporate in these SEMA builds. And like we're going to do another video on the Forsberg one as well, and you'll see those similar traits pop up, and it makes it a lot easier for them to accomplish the task. So
there you go.
Yeah, that was from filming.
That was.
I think we can play this because technically it's not copyright, right?
I mean, yeah, so this was the bumper drawer. Now, fun fact, this was filmed months after the first one. So if you saw the show, my hair and beard changed like 3 different times for the 3 separate times that I was on camera.
A week of filming?
Yeah, for like what is shown as like almost instantaneous.
This is the bumper drawer one? Okay,
yeah.
So then there must be other ones too.
There's a render. There was a CAD image of the bumper drawer right next to it.
Yeah, this is Doug.
There's the cab sitting all cut up.
Yeah, so these are what we provide clients with to make the organization easy. Same with solid files.
Well, we were helping them prep all the tubes, just about.
So it shows up on a pallet. So
yeah. Again, you can see all these videos in detail on the Instagram.
On the grams. Where the hell
is
the shot?
Oh, there it is. Oh, isn't that it?
No,
that's not. Okay, the cab looks similar.
That was a Silverado. That
right.
There we go. Here it is. So this is the stock file laid onto our 3D scan, and it was like super fucking close to a point that it was impressive. Jack and I were a little blown away because this was the first time we had like an actual stock file to compare to a cab scan that we have done, because we have scanned a bunch of cabs and all this other bullshit that are these larger scans. And if you guys know anything about 3D scanning, I mean, this is 2022, so it's a lot more common now per se. Yeah. But, you know, years ago, this was pretty gnarly. Like even the guys that we bought the equipment from, Tekk Industries, they were like, you did what now? And we're like, yeah, we fucking scanned these whole cabs and shit. And they're like, holy hell, like, how did you figure that out? We're like, wait. Like,
you haven't done this before?
You guys never had scanned something this big, so to speak? And they're like, no. And we're like, holy fuck. So yeah, so we helped them understand some of the complexities with these larger scans as well.
Well, because like to be fair, if we had not, I mean, if we had the stock file to begin with, we would have just drawn off that. Yes. We wouldn't have wasted all the time.
You are totally correct.
Right?
I would not have wasted our time, the production time, the time dealing with the Debertis if we had the stock deal. Like Doug wouldn't have had to go buy that truck. They wouldn't have had to have their guys strip that truck. So everyone would have saved time if they would have just given us the stock file originally. But with how these OEMs work in however they want to describe their fashion, is they got us the file after the truck was done.
Yeah.
So, but we don't work like that. Our operation, especially with 3D scanning, is like, oh, yeah, go fuck yourself. We'll just scan it now and get it done. Because I don't give a shit if we piss off the OEMs or whatever. Like, our job is to get shit done and get it done right and get it done safely. So we still hold to that, irrelevant of whether or not.
Well, we don't like go and, like I said, it's just get the job done.
Yeah, it's get the job done. So this is the stock file they sent us, mind you, after the truck was done, and everything lined up like fucking bitching. So it's kind of funny. That's how this stuff goes. But that's welcome to some of the insider bits of the industry. The OEMs, not always the easiest to work with, and typically, well, especially like nowadays, it's like, fuck them. Like, we don't need any of that shit. We just 3D scan it and move forward. Like, it's pointless to jerk us around. It is what it is. So yeah, so we fit the tubes accordingly. We get everything done, all bitching, and let's see what else on point out with this bad boy.
We also don't, like, when we reverse engineer cabs, we don't waste time with like resurface drawing the entire cab to the scan.
Yeah,
we have a whole process set up to auto surface it, which still takes a lot of time.
You know what? No, back up real quick. So let's go through the process real quick. So let's say, I'll scan a cab, etc. from my side. I'll have that in our Tekk software. I basically map out the whole cab with the scanner and the software. I get it all aligned, and then I pass that off to Jack.
Right. So when it gets over to me, it's all fucked off on the origin. So like I'll import it into 3D space, and then it's like twisted. Sometimes, most of the time we'll have the interior of the scan separated from the exterior, and usually we've scanned them at different times. So they're on separate origins themselves. So inside SolidWorks where I work, we have a plugin that allows me to take the scans, pull geometry from the scan files, and then I center it as best as I can, because these, nothing is symmetrical on these cars. It's all over the place. Yeah. So you pull the critical geometry that you're trying to center to try to put it on origin as best as possible, and then I align all of the pieces of the scan together like a puzzle. And sometimes it takes a little bit of doing. And that part's pretty involved because it's the starting point. If I fuck up,
you do the best
centering
you can.
The cab, all the tubes that we draw touching to one side are going to be off by whatever that offset is on the other side. So,
but nothing is straight or square.
Yeah.
Especially these OEM vehicles.
Yeah.
So you know that, and you get us as close as we can be to like what's realistic.
Yeah.
And so you gotta just have some give and take. If you know, and it fucking kills the engineering side of me because it's like, it's fuck. That's not perfect. That's not centered. Like, you know what I mean? But it's like you have to just let that shit go because like the cabs are cattywampus. There's nothing even close to fucking square. So you just got to be like, okay, we'll just set it in the most realistic position and move forward.
I mean, there's a couple things that at least work in my favor, and that's kind of consistency. You know, it's not really like, you know, it's not laziness, but you can take advantage of a couple knowns. So like, for example, the pinch welds in general are usually parallel to ground. So when the scan comes, like, well,
yeah,
in general,
and how we are setting up the computer, yeah.
So like you'll have body lines that are at slight curves and everything, but in general, if you have the edge of those pinch welds, because we jacked that cab up onto a forklift, scanned the whole bottom side of it.
Yes,
and
that's all on video too, I believe.
So what I do is I do my best to pull a plane that's touching like the pinch welds on all four corners. I'm able to then take a normal view of that plane and start putting down construction geometry that does my best to, you know, because the pinch welds are not going to be parallel to each other. So by essentially using like construction geometry and sketching in SolidWorks, I'm able to pull what is the closest center to it. And then I'm able, you know, with using 3D sketches and everything, I'm able to kind of fudge factor what plane was pulled from the pinch welds to get what is the best like mid plane of the entire vehicle. Which is where we're trying to center it. And then, you know, front to back, the origin can basically be like wherever we want. But that's step one, such that we have the same working coordinate system to pass the CAD files back and forth. So once I have it in a good spot, everything's aligned to origin. I first save a backup copy because all too often you'll have your master scan file will occasionally unload all the scans. So all that work you've done to align everything goes completely down the drain, and you will not get it to align exactly the same starting over again. So it's very important to save copies. Anyone out there trying to do this, just save yourself the hassle now and save copies of your master scan files that you're going to start auto-surfacing and doing all this stuff to. So once it's all done, then starts the auto-surf process. This can take a ton of time because it's essentially, like, instead of me sitting there and redrawing, you know, surface modeling over the scan with like the scan mesh as my reference, I'm just letting the software do its thing, which is why it looks all, you know, patchwork fitted because of, you know, the computer was doing it. It's way less work in my time because the computer can run overnight or however long it needs to do it. The trade-off is that the resulting file has a lot more data in it than a parametric modeled, like, you know, surface model of the truck. So that's kind of one of the trade-offs. But for our workflow, it's way faster. And, you know, that allows me to export a step file that we can then use in other CAD domains. So once that's all processed, then I split it up into its sections so that we end up with a step file of the interior, the exterior, any little parts that go to it. Sometimes that'll be body panels. Sometimes it's the door. So, for example, we want to be able to have the door separate because sometimes when we're scanning a cab, we only have one door if it's a really old cab, where in this case, we had both new from factory. So we were able to have one side fully closed, legit geometry for where the doors are going to sit, and one side completely open. And that was kind of my check for, okay, how well do I have the center of the cab? Because when I start mirroring tubes, you know, from driver to passenger side, is I'll draw all the tubes on the driver side and then mirror it to passenger. That becomes my double check for like, okay, did I get the symmetry plane correct? Shoot over to the room cam just so you can see kind of, we're just searching on the Instagram.
No, this is just, I was just going through some photos to go through some other other bits. But I mean, that is the general stuff in regard to, so here's a good shot of the third seat too. And, you know, again, this was another request that Brad had. It had to be a 3-seater in this extended cab. So for obvious reasons, like, we have to make sure like that fucking person's not going to die. So this, again, it comes into like all this material has to be tucked. Everything has to be fitted appropriately. All these tubes are up against the back wall. The seat sits right up against there. We made, these are what you would consider B-pillar supports. They double as like the harness bar too. So technically it's a split harness bar, so it's open for the occupant. and the harnesses for the front seats mount off this. And once this is welded in and structured, it's plenty safe enough. I mean, plenty safe enough. And strong enough in the event of any serious rollover or accident. And so, again, you can see how stuff's tucked. A very angry Jason for some reason. I don't remember what was going on. That's just like resting bitch face. It's fucking hilarious. I wonder what Doug was talking about. But yeah, here's some of the dash and center stuff coming through. Getting the motor in. Here's our A-pillar and things like that. Yeah, some more goodness on that. A-pillar support, our door bars, and we did these sort of like logo gusset plates in there. Again, Brad wanted this sort of rally-esque style, and we have the Deberti logo in that, so that's a little plate that kind of closes that off, gussets those up pretty nicely after they weld those tubes together, and just makes it really, really rad as far as like that look for rally cross style. It's also very safe. Here's another good shot of the third occupant section. They used these are from Armada Engineering, and they are weld-on little clips for the harnesses, and they're freaking rad. So again, Armada Engineering makes those, and they work pretty bitchin' for this stuff. Yeah, this picture was taken with a fucking potato, so that's happening.
I think I took these photos.
No, these are the ones Brad gave me. That's what I went through. These are the folders that Brad gave me. That's why I don't remember what's what. These are all Brad's photos.
Yeah, because
This is the marketing pack he said we're allowed to show. That's why I have these.
Luckily, they lived on the Central Coast at the time, because I was able to get out of college class, drive down there, and check in and see what was up, help them with other stuff.
And so, yeah, here's another aspect to that. The floor coming through. So remember, there was no stock frame. So all this is all fabricated. You can see the door bar is coming back to our C-pillar. So we're getting some nice load transfer through the chassis, both down the center spine and through the door bars as well. As you can see, come back. And then this goes back down to the rear of the chassis. There's the front X that was put in. That was put in last, too. We had a lot of clearance issues trying to stuff this fucking cut motor in a goddamn Tacoma. The height of it was gnarly. I mean,
in
so
CAD,
gnarly.
we had it dropped lower
as low as we could.
Than
they
ended up actually putting it at, too.
So here's some load transfer you can see coming back through the cab, these 4 tubes that protrude from our C-pillar down to this junction. And this is our main structure that holds the rear bulkhead. And so you can kind of see this is what we consider the spine, this section coming through, and it comes down and then it comes out to meet down with the X of the C-pillar, and it comes up here, and then it comes forward in the front to kind of, here we go. You can see it right here. It comes forward to meet up with the engine bay. And so what we're doing is we're building a spine down the center of the vehicle to create a lot of rigidity in the chassis coming back. And so a lot of this, I believe, was 1.25 inch material, right?
I think it might have been 1.5 inches.
It might be 1.5 inches.
Yeah.
I think this was 1.25 inches, these smaller pieces.
I'd have to open the CAD to check. I don't remember.
These are 1.5 inches for sure. These ones going in the engine. But I think the stuff above the trans and the center, these are 1.25 inches, these bad boys. I'm thinking those are 1.25 inches. 095. This is all 1.5 inches material right here. Yeah. And then, so yeah, you can kind of see some of that. Here's a good shot of some of the triangulation and layout going through this chassis.
I do wonder how accurately they represented the tubes in the video game model of this truck in Forza.
I don't even think they fucking try.
Well, it was actually hilarious to watch the Discovery show where they had they asked for STL files for them to put into their animation software, but apparently it didn't work or something. I mean, I exported like the tubes as a separate STL, the cab as a separate STL, but apparently it didn't work. So whoever was doing their modeling over there just kind of like downloaded the, what you could get off the internet for a Toyota Tacoma, and then like just kind of threw in some other tubes and everything around it to like do the animation. Didn't they scan it and
shit for Forza?
Yeah. Oh no. So for Forza they did. I'm talking about the animation in the actual TV show. But for Forza,
that was something else.
Yeah, for Forza, Doug was describing it to me. Some guy shows up, lays out an entire patchwork on the ground. So he like creates a coordinate system on the ground around the truck, then pulls out a very expensive camera. So it wasn't even a complete kind of 3D sketch or like a 3D scanner per se. Mm-hmm. He took pictures from every single possible angle. Because I think for like
a designated amount of angles or something?
Yeah, for it basically so that they could create in space a 3D image of it. And then, they were probably using like Blender or something, because Blender has a couple cool features where you can take like pictures and it kind of automatically, if you kind of start with like a wireframe of the mesh, it projects the pictures that you took and essentially creates a 3D object. And that's kind of like the fast way to, essentially create your animated vehicle for the video game per se. That's kind of like one of their like tricks to speed modeling a very accurate representation of the vehicle.
Yeah. Well, that's not our department.
Nope. But it's fun to watch YouTube videos of how they do it.
Fair enough. Yeah. So moving back to this, we've got a good shot of the cooling and the fuel system layout. Now, this is what Brad wanted to do relative to weight distribution, and how we were trying to get the weight in a certain fashion to complement the sort of driving techniques and stuff that he wanted to do. So there was some headaches to some of that because we're trying to package a lot into this, very low truck, while maintaining all the other fun stuff, safety, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a good shot of the rear bulkhead in this assembly. So we do have a pretty bitchin' winner's quick change that we designed this from. Now, I set this suspension up. It's very similar to a C7 Corvette in layout. I did tweak it a little bit with the camber caster curves because I ended up giving it a little bit more suspension travel, and so it's also wider. It's 6 inches wider. So on top of that, the arms were beefed up accordingly, and then designed in a manner where I felt they weren't too heavy, but they were also plenty strong enough for what he wanted to do, which was do some of that rallycross, rally raid type of stuff. So if you look at it, it is similar in layout as a Corvette C7 or C6, but the geometry is definitely different. I tweaked that, and then I also have it much wider. So for obvious reasons, I had to tweak some of that too. It does run a Corvette C7 hub, though, unit bearing style hub for the rear and axle shafts into that winner's quick change, and then Corvette brake package and stuff bolted on. So here's another shot of the setup in the rear. And we ran 3/4 inch rod ends for all of the chassis pivots. And these are 7/8 bearings for the upright pivot, and then 3/4 inch rod ends for the toe link. And so all of this is 4130. Let's dive into some of the arms themselves. I think we've got some pictures of that too. So you can kind of see some of the fabrication there when they were building that rear bulkhead. And it all just snaps into place onto the back of that tube frame that we put in there.
And the suspension was 6 inches wider per side compared to stock?
It was very wide. Well, compared to a C7.
Yeah.
In theory. If you were to take sort of that measurement and go from there. Oh, yeah, we did the center cap adjusters on that, so he ran that instead. But it's still a unit bearing. So here's some CAD shots. You can see I have the sway bar tucked really low in the chassis and forward. It comes off that frame and the lower arm. And these arms are... So I designed these to be as simple and straightforward as possible per request. They were going to TIG weld them on edge, so it's all 1/8 inch 4130 material. These are 7/8 bearing cups from Cartech. These are light racing single pinch bungs with 3/4 inch rod ends. Same for the upper. Again, making stuff very simple for these guys. These had to be built like really fucking quickly. So we had to make stuff very straightforward and simple, fabrication friendly to some degree. And we did have some tooling and fixtures. The upright is a combination of different materials with a faceplate, etc. You can see some of the C7 bits that are in that cab model. But yeah, it's cycled about 7.5 inches on the high side in the rear. I think like 6 inches usable is kind of like where it landed. And so here's some more shots of that rear bulkhead, bits that all went together, and it just, snapped into place. Here's a good shot of the sway bar that's tucked up under the chassis in the back, and then comes forward and mounts to that lower arm, like so. Yeah, here's another shot of this. Assembly, winner's quick change, things like that. Now this CAD model right here has an adjustable winner's mount. We actually took that out, and we just went with a rigid winner's mount. So this was the first revision of this assembly. We ended up going on Rev 2. We took out the adjustable winner's mount, and that's just a solid setup.
Well, I mean, you didn't know what the pinion angle was going to be at the start.
Well, no, there was a few different things
couple reasons
that were just like trying to figure out on top of the time frame and other BS to get this done in a very quick fashion. So that was kind of cool how it just basically clicked into this tube frame in a fashion to where like we minimized the time consumption so that you can kind of see here, it just kind of clicks in each little bit, because again, we're trying to get something that is of quality and done to where we don't have extensive tooling to get this accomplished. So this is all like laser cut in a way that they could almost self-fixture to some degree and plop it up into the chassis and, be done with it. Very, very quick and dirty.
Well, and had we had more time, there would have been like alignment tongue and grooves from some of the plate work to the 2x3 tubes.
Well, we didn't necessarily. No. We didn't do that on purpose. I don't like doing that on these because you want to be able to have enough adjustment to slide it if you need to fudge it, because we don't. We're building so quick and on the fly to some degree that having the ability to slide it back and forth and get it perfect relative to real life in the computer that's why both front and rear were done. I didn't want any of that in there. I want the ability to move it ever so slightly if we need to gain a 1/4 inch here or whatever, because what we have finalized as far as the cab chassis and all the bits may be slightly different than real life because when we get down to it. So the ability to slightly fudge that is key in this specific build. And so the front was done that way as well. That's the front bulkhead. Let's I'm trying to pull up more of the suspension bits. Let's see here. This is front stuff. More cab stuff, front stuff. But yeah, so this was, again, done in that fashion. Quick and dirty, so to speak. As easy as I could make it for them and the fab guys. Arms just clicked together. They had fixtures for them too, which basically held the spread of the arm. And I went really wide with the rear arm itself to get us a good amount of spread because they were going to run an insane amount of horsepower. Then I did this, reverse J-arm thing up here to get us room for bits up in this area. And here's your sway bar setup again. So you can kind of see some of the geometry characteristics with the angle of the lower arm and the upper arm. And again, if you're familiar with any of the Corvette stuff, this does mimic that in layout and flavor. So we're not far off of that sort of style for the rear. So I guess the best way to describe it is this is like a C7-esque independent wide rear suspension that I designed for this bad boy. And then let's go to the front. So the front was a little different. What we started with, what Brad really liked was the 2018 Mustang front end with some of the drift stuff. So what we had to do is we had to have 70 plus degrees of turning in the front end of this guy, as well with it being robust enough to handle some of the jumps and things like that, so to speak. With that said, he started off initially mocking up some stuff that was from Justin Pollock, a drift guy. And it was unfortunately not cooperating to the degree that we wanted done. So I had to kind of rework a ton of that shit and start from scratch to some degree. So what ended up happening was we had to make all new arm mounts, rack mounts, bottom side with lower arms, etc. So here's kind of the bulkhead and the lower arm I designed to get us where we wanted to be. This is all 4130 plate work, and it got us the appropriate amount of turning, strength we needed, adjustment we needed, and got everything moving in the right direction, relatively speaking. Now, this doesn't mean that like the stuff that Justin, the arms from Pollock, etc., were wrong. It's just what we were doing was not the application that Justin designed that stuff for. They were designed for a stock 2018-esque Mustang, and for obvious reasons, like this is not that fucking same. So we ended up having to do a lot of different stuff. So like here's the front strut mount we tied into the chassis. Here you can kind of see the bulkhead. This is all laser cut plate, and a little bit of tab and slot with some ears on this stuff. Again, we tried to make everything as self-fixturing. When I'm designing this stuff, you have to take a lot into account other than can we just make shit wazoo. If if you're designing stuff just to be wazoo 24/7, that's really fucking easy, because then you don't have these other specifications that get in the way to some degree. So like, it would be so much easier if it was just, okay, we just wanted it as sick as fuck as we can make it, no holds barred. Well, cool. But then that takes a lot more time. It's a lot more investment. Like we had days to just fucking do all this. Like I had like 2 days to rework the entire front suspension, redraw all of it, and get everything off to laser. And it's fucking like 48 hours of not fucking sleeping. But I had to get it done because we had to get this thing moving in the right direction and have it so that it met the specifications that Brad wanted. And it's basically a ton of fucking 4130 plate. I did my best to make it self-locating. And again, like I was just referring to, this whole section, let me see if I can find a bulkhead section. It just slid back and forth on the chassis and into location as we got this whole front end perfected. There was another series of pictures that had that. To showcase what I was just referring to with it being modular to some degree. There we go. So you can see all of this basically slides on the frame rails. So we could slide that back and forth and get everything lined up perfect how Brad wanted it. So this is like one chunk assembly that matches the strut tower. And you can kind of see here, this is the steering rack. So we 3D scanned this, got this in there. This is a Ford rack. I mean, this is what the Deberti supplied us with. It's what they wanted to run. So we made all that work, all bitchin'. Got it all set up in there, geometry all figured out, bitchin', et cetera, et cetera. Made sure it worked with the motor. Again, clearance was just a fucking nightmare on this. Yeah, so here's kind of a shot of like the starting of the bulkhead, et cetera. And like these had the ability to shift forward and back a little bit, not much, a half inch or so, but still it's just to get it dead perfect where we want relative to the chassis. Because we were building this truck, kind of in stages, so to speak. So we had to make sure all this fit and was kosher relative to this, because in the real world, some of this stuff may end up a slightly different distance or bullshit relative to body and that stuff. So when we're doing these things, we try to give the builders the best of both worlds, with the ability to kind of shift it on the fly where they need it, while also maintaining some of that self-fixturing to kind of take some of the guesswork out of it. A little bit of a challenge, especially with such a short time frame, but whatever. So the bottom line is it's very similar to what would be considered like a 2018 Mustang, like I was saying, with some changes in there. I had to change the geometry slightly and rework some of those bits and make it all perfect to meet what he wanted to do, on top of it being robust enough so that it doesn't just fucking fall apart, and that is a challenge when you don't have any time to kind of do that. So here's a shot from the interior of that bulkhead sitting in place. You can see they just have it clamped in here right now. So this is probably when they were getting everything lined up and centered, so to speak, relative to where we wanted stuff to be. And And I think why did we scan this again?
Okay, so
there was something we were checking.
Yeah, we 3D scanned that to try and get the top geometry to draw them a filter box.
Ah, that's right.
Because they were trying to take the stock filter box. They were trying to take the stock Canon filter with its stock mount, which was like a couple inches higher, and drop it down under the hood. It turned out to not be possible because they had to lift the motor up a little bit to actually like have clearance for everything. So we 3D scanned the top so that we could attempt to draw for them a sheet metal like drop filter mount. And when they they ended up still doing that, but it still cut off like 4 inches or something from the top for that motor. And they just kind of rolled with it. Their initial renderings did not have the filter sticking through the hood, but it was just not possible to fit everything they had going, trying to put, have all the headers underneath it, because I believe there were some, like Toyota had very specific specs for how the headers needed to be, and they couldn't really fit them correctly while also having it dropped kind of where, like, the motor dropped low enough to where we had intended for it. Because when, I think you scanned it with the...
Yeah, here's a good
with
shot.
The filter
you can kind of see some of the stuff. It's like right fucking there on top of the bits. And keep in mind the cab is the bottom of the cab is the bottom of this tube right here. So we are like right fucking there. That was stuffing a massive fucking motor in this chassis. I mean, it's still a Tacoma. So yeah, that was a fucking headache, without question. So again, this is some of the stuff that, like, it helps when we're designing this stuff to understand that some of these bits you kind of have to wedge in place or do on the fly, so to speak, because we don't have the time to appropriately do everything in the computer. At the same time, we can't like afford stuff to be revised through the process like we can with some or other like high-end builds or builder shops and things like that aren't on these sort of super strict deadlines and things like what we have to deal with to make sure that like the Debertis can still meet their obligations. So some of these bits we kind of blend, computer work to getting stuff done on the fly in real life. And so in that aspect, we went back to scan that once everything was in to double check and see about the party. But that is, I mean, there was a serious height issue.
And I think that was also to draw a shock tower brace.
No, that's already in. It's all.
Was that? I thought,
you can see it in the scan. This is all done.
I thought there was one. I thought there was one more that they wanted on top.
No. That's how I did it. And then they wanted to run something. They wanted to run that assembly like you're referring to, as opposed to what we originally saw. And so that hit. That was too close for comfort. And so all of that got ditched when that decision was made. And then they went to this tube structure instead, which cleared, not by much, but it did clear. And so, again, some of the variances and differences. Like, here's a good shot you can see of how this can move back and forth on the chassis appropriately to get it all dialed in. Just trying to get stuff done in an appropriate fashion. See, everything's self-fixtures clicked together. There's a good shot of the front end. You can kind of see how meaty everything is. They wanted everything to be pretty stout. Now it's hollow. It's not like there's a ton of weight up there, but at the same time, this definitely is more stout than like a fucking stock Mustang or any of those bits. It still has this sort of rallycross-esque stuff to it, so that it's no bullshit. That was the other brace that we had done, but the air thing was not cooperating with that guy.
There it is.
Yeah. So that was the one that we had changed out. But that, I believe, was what Brad originally wanted to run before we went back to the X deal. And then so that's kind of some of the rundown of the suspension.
We did a couple
of things
billet
like that.
Interior parts.
Yeah. I'm just seeing if before we jump into that, I was going to just make sure we're not missing anything else. Kind of got all that covered. As far as tube chassis stuff goes,
that was basically it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like a lot of the major stuff that I can think of, this layout per se, this is obviously a very early render with this bent tube up there, etc. Because we all went to miters, and then the bulkheads and everything changed as well. But yeah, you can kind of
and all this design was like in the process of a couple days.
Yeah, this stuff goes very quick. Like I said, to meet the obligations that the Debertis have, or anyone in this situation, so to speak, like you don't have time to fuck around. Decisions have to be made relatively quickly, and you got to get shit done. So it's fun. And like I said, I've done a bunch of these, but they're all kind of different, yet all very similar in the fact that it's not like the other stuff we do with racing and things like that. This is a whole different avenue and environment of building than what we are accustomed to in like some of the racing side of the industry. That's why I call it like the promotion side. SEMA promotion builds for cool factor and for fun and sick videos on social media and things like that.
Well, you should clarify like an actually drivable SEMA promotional vehicle.
That is true. Not all the SEMA stuff is that rad. But we do the best we can to get our clients into the rad zone.
There were no Bluetooth drive chassis. Drive shafts on this.
This fucker was a turn and burn. Here's the little gusset plate and the logo that we put in for the tube structure. Here's all the tubes that come back from laser. This is all cut by Cal West. Everything is numbered. All the Jack puts in etchings on the tubes so that they can go from the diagram to that. A-pillars, more tubes. Kind of like that.
It was still very minimal bending. Just trying to
we try to stick to miters
as possible.
So when you're doing this stuff, the less bending you have, the better. Bending creates inaccuracy. I don't give a fuck who you think is doing the chassis or whatever fucking bender they have or think they have. Anytime you're doing a vehicle like this and you have a bunch of bends in it, all the bends create inaccuracies. That's just how it goes. So you could have the most wazoo fucking bender ever and it's going to have inaccuracies. And those little bits and inaccuracies can cause what I was referring to earlier. So yeah, it's a good point you brought that up. So when these bends are done, now, they might be symmetrical side to side, but they might be off by a fraction of a degree or a full degree, so that this edge over here is a little different than the A-pillar down here relative to CAD. So what might happen is the actual physical cab, relative to where we have it in the computer, might be forward or rear of where we have it placed. What that does is then dictate to what I was referring to before by having the bulkheads intentionally laid out to where they can shift tiny bits. So if the cab is, let's say, rearward a 1/4 inch from the computer to real life, well, we have the ability to slightly shift the bulkheads ever just a tiny bit. So we did that for Brad to help get him in. That's again, we're doing everything in a fashion that meets this timeline and the style of building too. So there's just another trick that I like to incorporate in these builds is you give a little bit of adjustability on the fly when you're fabricating to get everything lined up all rad. And so, just another aspect that we do. And then for some of the cool interior stuff, Jack can elaborate on some of these.
Yeah, so like a while after all of the tubes and everything had been drawn, they
not
wanted
like a long time, but that was the next step.
It was a
like
decent
a year
chunk after. No, it wasn't after a year, but compared to like the initial design process, a little while after, they wanted to do a couple interior bits. So like he had some they had like the third brake hand, like the drift brake handle. And
we'll go into that. So
let's
go through.
So in this case, they had a full carbon fiber dash that they were dropping in, but they wanted a billet section to locate all of the main driver panels. It was still very minimal, but essentially like a billet layout for it, so that they could kind of two-tone it with the gold inside. So I drew that to fit all of the components. I think it was an AEM controller. I don't remember now. But then they had the gear number indicator for the sequential. That's the red. Kind of pull it up on screen here. So so the main center is obviously your main dash cluster, and then there we go. So everything was recessed into the billet. They had a switch pro for a couple of the lights and a couple of the main functions. That larger pocket is the gear number and your gear number. This little screen that is built in with the sequential that tells you which gear you're in. And then they had the emergency pull pin. I don't remember which cutoff it was exactly. But yeah, so it was just like a nice, clean way.
The pull pin?
Well, no, I don't remember. Oh, the fire.
Pull pin is fire suppression.
Okay, yeah,
system.
it was a fire suppression system. I didn't remember which one it was for.
System.
Yeah. So it was just like a nice little billet thing that then they could just match
to be clear,
drill.
that doesn't cut anything off.
No,
it's literally just a fire suppression system.
I didn't remember if it was a fire suppression or what it was. I just had a hole in the location, so it was just a nice little billet thing that they could gold anodize and have it match the gold anodize ended up being a little bit different because they wanted the interior billet to match the wheels.
They tried to.
But it did not. They ended up having to like completely re-sand off and coat the wheels because they showed up with like a slight off color finish to the gold inside. So that was a little fun fact. And then their main brake handle, they had
there's another, and these doors were done by Morgan Clark. So that is MCD1. He was up there for a week or so, and he did these doors and I think some other bits too on the truck, whatever you want to call it.
So he brought all his tools with him.
Well, multiple people involved in this because like that's not our forte per se. Like, nor are we really doing like that's not a door you do in CAD.
Nope.
That is a hand fabricated sheet metal door, and you can definitely tell Morgan Clark's style in some of that if you follow his stuff as well. This is a dash from Race Truck shit. I think this is like a Fiberworks pre-runner dash, a carbon fiber dash that you would see in some of the race trucks.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly. I do remember it was like really thick, and they did not want to cut. They didn't want to like try to place all that stuff by hand. That's why they just wanted to cut a hole for the steering and then have a billet piece that they could perfectly center and then just match drill, and it would just bolt straight to the carbon. Yeah, and it worked. It worked out pretty good. Deberti logo in there did turn out nicely. And then for the handles, so here's a good shot. This is kind of a fun little side story. So I think Doug had a set of brake handles like this made a while back, and it was all one-piece machined. And part of this whole move to North Carolina, they wanted to start manufacturing like a bunch of this kind of stuff with a bunch of variations. So partly to make it a little bit easier to machine, and then also to kind of add into that product variety, is I essentially like created for them a standard, hole pattern so that they, it was very simple, but they could then swap tops from the stems. So in this case, this was their, I don't even remember. They had like a marketing term for it. I think it was like the vampire or something is what they called this one. And it was essentially like a lightened up version of the green handle that you might have seen in a couple of those earlier photos, but just kind of like refreshed. And then the stem was machined separate so that you weren't taking a massive block of material and getting a single. It was actually a little bit more efficient for material usage in that regard and a little bit lighter, but it still retained the same style. So, just a very straightforward, third brake handle. Well, go into what this is. This is a 3D printed handle relative to the machine part. Yeah. So, because they weren't 100% certain about my idea to make the top removable from the bottom, because if you have one thing that's like a solid piece billet and now you're going to essentially have it just connect together with two bolts, sometimes you got to convince people that's a good idea. So I was able to 3D print a one-to-one mock-up that they could fully drop in. It was printed strong enough to cycle it, printed it out of gold, filament so that they could put it inside and actually like get a good visualization for where they were going to place it. So it's from this picture, it's actually hard to tell it's a little bit hard to tell which is the 3D printed versus the aluminum, but the lighter yellow is the 3D printed part, and then the darker gold is the final CNC machine version.
That was anodized. Yeah.
I believe it was anodized.
Yes, that's how it
No,
was.
I think when they were, I don't remember for certain, but I think they tried to anodize it gold, but because they were trying to standardize having them match the outside, that they may have actually gone and had it powder coated with the wheels.
Oh, to match it.
To match the colors. Because they did something really cool on the wheels, which was like a gold flake with a clear coat on top. Yep, there's the printed piece. So they did like a gold flake powder coat with like this clear coat on the top that made it like really sparkly. And when they got the aluminum back from being gold anodized, it totally didn't match. It was kind of like matte, and they didn't really like the finish. So I think they might have fully sanded off all of the anodizing and sent it to the same powder coater to have it.
Well, no, you can't really sand off anodizing per se. That's not how that works. Well, but they just recoated them.
All I'm saying is that like I remember watching.
They had to do something to fix that dilemma. But yeah, that was some of the bits, and then one thing too is we did do some 3D printed body shits.
Yeah, so like right at the end, they were trying to match it to the render as close as possible.
Yes, and
the render had these front canards and rear like dive planes, I guess you could call them.
Yeah, there's a good shot. That's the front canards right there.
Yeah, so they sent us the kind of the STL bits. I was able to parse them out of the file and then convert them to a part that could be 3D printed with like mounting flanges and everything. So those were printed in one piece, and then they just screwed and glued them on.
Yeah, but that is just a standard issue PETG print. Nothing too crazy or fancy.
And they're still running. They're still on.
Yeah. Did we ever make more than one set?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
The original set. I think they asked for a set out of black, but they ended up vinyl wrapping it out of carbon fiber look-alike vinyl to make it seem like it was carbon fiber, and they did a good vinyl job, so it was kind of
wrapped. Yeah, it was wrapped.
Well, but they did it cleanly, so that where the edges wrapped around, it almost looked like it had been an actual carbon fiber part, instead of just like cutting the stencils.
And this body was done by ADV. That's
fiberglass.
Right. ADV fiberglass.
Yeah, they're featured on the show.
That's true. Part. I just, for some reason, I was missing the name, but whatever.
It was like $60,000 worth of high density foam, because like for example.
No. The foam was not that much. The foam was definitely a lot less than that. I'm sorry. Maybe the overall machining the foam was not even close to that expensive. No.
I remember saying it was pretty expensive.
No. If you're counting machining and stuff like that, but just the foam to cut this was definitely not $60,000. It's not cheap.
I don't remember the exact number they told me, but it was definitely up there. Because they did the entire hood scoop was one piece back around the rear of the cab and down.
Yeah, that is
fiberglass
too. Yeah,
massive one piece mold.
Let's see. Trying to think. Yeah, there we go. That's what you're referring to.
Yeah,
is this top piece right here?
That was all one piece.
And that is again fiberglass. Same with these bedsides. That was done by ADV, and so this cab again is the only thing that's fucking stock. Everything else was done accordingly.
Well, yeah, the cab, the doors, the hood, part of the
not the interior of the doors,
That was all cut out.
Yeah,
but the hood. And the main part of the front grille, which then had the other stuff kind of attached to it. And then
so
the
those
rear,
are some stock bits.
Yeah, and then the bed gate.
Yeah, which I think they fucking hollowed or some shit.
Yeah, they totally cut it all out, but they kept that part of the shell, and then, that makes it obviously easier to then mount the lights and everything into the stock section.
Yeah, and this was at SEMA, in the Alcan booth. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but
Alcon brakes.
Yeah. So that's just one aspect that you can see. And so this is some of the tidbits, a lot of some of the background information on that. But this is again just one of the many type of these builds over the years I've been doing this, and it's cool to see. It's definitely different than the off-road stuff. Off-road's probably more of my passion per se, but I do love doing these types of projects. I do love doing these tube chassis cars, trucks, whatever you want to call them, because they're always a challenge and they're fun. And at least the ones we're allowed to disclose and talk about do have all their own sort of unique aspects and features, although I kind of keep some similarities with some of it because of, like I was referring to, the build process, timeline, budget constraints, and other specifications require some of these tricks that I implement for the builders to make their life a little bit easier and a little bit less stressful. And so, if you're ever interested in any of this stuff, you can always contact Jack and I at Tekk Consulting. That is our deal. And so, if you have oh, cool. I forgot about that. Deberti's truck is on our portfolio main page. Yeah, 100 did this.
Yeah.
I forgot that that's what it was. But yeah, so here's here we go. Here's the Deberti truck. So again, you can see some of the stuff that we've done over the years, blah, 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 all that horse shit. And contact us. You can fill out this form. It goes to me. I can then reply. Usually within 24 hours, I'll reply. But yeah, if you happen to be looking for this type of stuff, this is what we do.
Well, now's the time to get in for SEMA this year.
Oh fuck, I don't even know if we can. What is it? It's
usually the SEMA
project. What is the date today?
The date today is April 1st.
It's April 1st. Yeah, I think they if you're just now starting a SEMA project, in other words, you're contacting us, you may be too late.
Yeah. For this kind of a build. Usually done. Like the correct time to start a SEMA build is like not 3 months before SEMA of that year starts, so that you've got basically like a year and 3 months.
Yeah, if you have like a solid year, that would be great. Again, this one did not go down that way, but again, I specifically was talking about some of the tricks that we're implementing into these things design-wise to meet those goals, to make this stuff work, to make the build process as fluid as possible. And some of the guys that we deal with, they've never built tube chassis trucks before. And I think like in Deberti's situation, they've never really built a tube chassis. And this is like their first experience with having stuff laser cut and bent. And they were very pleasantly surprised with that, because the chassis went together very quickly. That is something that is huge, because once we start hitting, print from the computer, it's impressive how stuff shows up in a pallet, and I would say within a week, right?
Well, yeah, like I mean, we had the design done.
No, I'm talking about them putting it together.
Right.
Yeah, it was like a week to do the chassis. So like obviously we're doing a bunch of work prior to that in the computer, but my point being is like once that gets there, it's like plug and play.
Yeah.
That's how we design it.
I was saying how they had it was 2 weeks from between we scanned it to tubes were getting dropped off and they started putting it together, which is crazy fast turnaround time.
Yeah, so again, that is a little unusual because that is a very fast turnaround time. Normally, it's definitely more than that. So like for SEMA builds, you're kind of already missed the boat to some degree for this year. Even the guys that are like just now getting a roller chassis together, it's kind of like, you're really pushing it.
Well, what's it? It's like once the roller is together, it's like you're 75% on the way and 90% to go, right?
Yeah, it's usually, the easy part is doing the roller. Like our side of the table, although it seems like the difficult part is really the fucking easy part.
Yeah.
It's all the other bullshit, the plumbing, the electronics, the sheet metal, the fit and finish of everything, getting stuff like to a caliber where you can present it at SEMA and not be fucking laughed at. Like, that's the stuff that takes a lot of talent and time.
Yeah.
And the Deberti shine in that. Like they fucking rocked that shit. And they did that with several other builds.
Yep.
So like not fucking around. And that's the one thing too about the Debertis is like there's so much smoke and mirrors in the industry and bullshit with like who's actually doing the work or who's doing what, And the Debertis, it's like they're not that. Like Brad was fucking there, borderline sleeping in that shop to get shit done. Like hands dirty.
5 a.m. to midnight, like for a couple months straight.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's actually doing it. And I know this may sound surprising, but a lot of these builders that, do similar stuff to the Debertis, like, they ain't fucking doing that. They have, like, guys that, work for them, and then they just take all their credit or pretend, like, the other TV shows and stuff, like, it's all fucking smoke and mirrors and pretend. The Debertis happen to be, like, some of the few that are actually fucking getting dirty and doing work.
Welcome to, like, that is just the dirty, dark secret of SEMA,
or these promotional builds.
Yeah, the promotional build is done, and then if it's sitting in like one of the major OEM builds, all the guys there who are like just the rep, like the sales representative who's there for like that day is taking credit over like all the work that was done.
Engineers or whatever you want.
Yeah, they're all being like, oh yeah, like we designed this and that, and it's like, no, you didn't. You like paid the shop and they built it for you. Okay, it just rolled in here in time for this whole event, and then you're there like taking credit for all the work and everything that was put into it.
Or they're, other individuals in our side of the industry, so to speak, that try to take credit for stuff. It's a very weird thing to me.
Got to get that clout.
I guess so. Some people, and they do it like fucking knowingly. Like they know that like they didn't do X, Y, or Z, but they'll take credit for it. And then,
well, it's kind of like just the plague of today. I mean, they know that
on social media or whatever.
They know that like we have such short attention spans now these days that you can take credit for something then when it has all the highlight. And a bunch of people will see it, and you kind of pick up with that, and you make like that impression on a bunch of people. And then, in 2 months' time, if the truth comes out, no one's paying attention to like what the actual truth is. They're like, actually, the reverse happens. They'll now think you're taking credit from that person's work because the truth then comes out. They think like you're trying to like take the thunder or something. It's really interesting how like short attention span we have when it comes to tracking this kind of stuff. I mean, like I said, when I first got involved with this industry, my mind was fucking blown because I was of the impression like, oh yeah, like Toyota builds all their own concept cars and like they do all that engineering in-house, and come to find out that it's like, nope, it's all outsourced.
Typically speaking, it's like a lot of guys doing ground and pound type of work. Going through the gauntlet, like what I put you through, and what I've done a bunch of times. I mean, now I do it in the computer, so to speak, but it's still late nights. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of I guess you'd say building anxiety, because like you have to make decisions very quickly, very early on in a build that could fuck the whole project up, and like you don't have a choice. Like things have to go correctly to make it to SEMA, to make the promotion, to make these obligations. And if you don't make those initial decisions correct, like you're going to find out how fucked you are in a few months when you don't have time to be fucked. Like it's not like a normal build where you have a lot of time to sit and revise and massage and make every little bit perfect. Like you got to fucking be on it from the beginning. And that's why we do things a certain way, because I know from experience that like this ain't like we can build the perfect masterpiece. Now it's the perfect masterpiece inside of what we're doing, but it's not like we have multiple years and budget and just, like in some other facets to build a true masterpiece and take time. Like the Debertis have a schedule. They have a certain time frame they have to be at. All this stuff has to come into place. So that's why it's like, oh, you could have designed it like so-and-so, or it could have been more wazoo or whatever. Like, yeah, I made the arms look fucking simple. Yeah, this starts with a fucking square frame. Yeah, there's all these other facets. It's like it's intentionally done in that way to have certain aspects go together fast, be complementary to other aspects of the build, because everything is being done in process, on top of the skill sets that they have in the shop relative to time consumption. Like they don't have a fucking massive team of fabricators that are all super highly skilled. Like there was only a few guys there helping them. Like this is not a huge operation. So we have to keep that in mind, that like their time is also valuable. So if I design something that takes them, 10 hours to put one arm together, when I could have easily done it where they could have done that in 4 hours, I just fucked them on 6 hours. Can't do that. That's going to be, okay, cool. So maybe you made a more wazoo arm that looks better on fucking Instagram, but in the reality of schemes, like you just fucked up. The whole build's fucked up because you're adding all these extra hours and bullshit into it that could fuck these guys on the backside of the equation. So it's like the argument can always be, you can make stuff way more fucking wazoo. Of course, that's fucking easy. What's hard is doing like these sort of projects where you have to take all these other factors into account and get shit done. That's where the true, knowledge base and hard work comes into play relative to making sure these obligations are met by our clients, such as the Debertis, which is also a very valid thing. I keep referring to them as clients, and we say clients because there's a lot of this misconception, like every fucking SEMA stuff is all done for free. No, every fucking person that Tekk works with, they pay. The Debertis pay, Forsberg pays, everybody pays when it comes to all these sort of SEMA projects. All the other guys that we're not allowed to talk about, the non-disclosure bullshit, yeah, they pay. This is what we do for a living, and this is what we're hired to do. So we don't come in and do any of this stuff for free. Everybody has a bill, and depending on the project and depending on time consumption, it can be a large bill, it can be a small bill, it can be a medium bill. It all varies. We work off of time and materials, and it is what it is. But at the same time, we come in and we get shit done accordingly relative to the specifications of the project and the clientele. Our specialty is chassis and suspension, although we are dabbling into 3D printing and body stuff, which you're going to start seeing more of that, and we're going to be elaborating more on that, especially with like the Forsberg video, because that car is that you could show that, Jack, real quick. That's a 3D printed body on that car. That's also a fucking tube chassis car that we did, and I designed that tube chassis in the very similar fashion with the Deberti's type of fashion as well. So, those are other things I like to highlight, so they don't just think that like we're just doing all this shit for all these dudes for free and they get everything for free. Like, fuck no, the Debertis don't get everything for free. They pay for a lot of their shit. Like, they understand it's hard work. They understand that we're busting our ass and everyone else that's involved. So like they're having to spend money to do this. There's no fucking free rides on any side of the table. That's another misconception I'd like to put to bed, because this is our job, and I'm very fortunate to be in a position that I get paid to do this, as opposed to having to do this for free, so to speak, for reputation or for more work. Like, we don't need any more fucking work. Jack and I are overloaded to understate any of that. Hence why we were saying that if you're starting a SEMA project right now, you're going to be in a world of hurt.
Well, it's like,
especially if you're calling us right now for a SEMA project, that's going to be very difficult.
Well, and it's like what you're saying, that 6 hour. I mean, anyone who's done one of these projects with that kind of a deadline has been there the night before that it needs to be ready, wondering or hoping that they could have had another 6 hours to finish one of the last tasks. Yes. And if you get caught up in those earlier stages, or like it's not as productive earlier, all of a sudden you're at the end and wondering like, man, if only I had another 4 hours, this could be so much better. When it's really like, if only I had another like 6 months, then everything would be perfect.
Yeah, or you can, like I said, you can make stuff way more fucking wazoo. Yep. But like, I went through, these arms are simple. This chassis is simple. It's all done intentionally, because we know at the end of the day, like, if I can fucking get the Debertis, like you said, if I can get them 6 fucking hours at the end because of how I specifically design stuff to not eat up that extra little bit here or there, yeah, that's how this works. That's how we win. That's why we win these builds. And that's why we do what we do, because I make sure they have that extra time. It fucking matters. The wazoo factor, to some degree, to be fair, some degree matters as well. But when you're talking about this sort of stuff, you have to keep in mind on the design side, is what I'm drawing going to fuck them on those 6 hours? Or is it going to open up 6 hours? Is it going to open up an extra day? Is it going to open up an extra few days for them to do whatever they need to do to get it done at the last minute? And it doesn't fuck. Even if I got them an extra fucking month and a half, you damn well know they'd still be there the night before, still finishing the stuff, because that's how builders are. They're always going to be going. If I still have more time, I'm going to add this, I'm going to add this. So instead of cutting out extra bits or bullshit, they're still going. But still, my thought process from the beginning is, how can I give them a little bit more on the backside from the very beginning to make sure that they're not motherfucking us or whatever it is, because they were short a small fraction of time that got eaten up because of X, Y, or Z, because of how I drew something when I knew better.
Well, take, for example, on that exact truck, the 6 hours that they saved in welding suspension arms together, they were able to spend entirely aluminum custom paneling the full inside of the truck so that it could be all gloss black powder coated.
Yep.
which, that's
finish
not
work.
Yeah, finish work.
Badass finish work.
Another it was like 6 hours of finish work. I mean,
way more than that, but still
way more than that. But I mean, like,
added stuff. Yeah.
It's not fun drawing aluminum cover panels in the computer, and it's not much more fun making them by hand.
I guess. Well, no. I mean, yeah, you're like me in that aspect. I hate doing sheet metal work by hand. I'm not that guy. Like Morgan is that guy. He can fucking sit there and just whiz that shit out all day long.
Yeah.
I'd be bored out of my fucking mind.
Well, the reason why I say like it's not fun doing sheet metal work like that in the computer is because when you're drawing it that what you are mapping out is not going to match the tubes exactly.
Yeah, that is a nightmare.
You feel like when you're drawing that kind of stuff for the client that it's like, yeah, I'm creating like the starting template, but if it's under on one side and over on one side, arguably that's more handwork than if you just made your cardstock template.
It does depend.
Cut it out on a sheet.
Because some of the guys can really shred fast, and they can shred the sheet metal like butter. So again, there's a lot of argument to that too. And where do you draw the line in some of these instances? Because again,
client request.
Well, like in this specific avenue, we didn't do extensive chassis tooling and fixturing. So like the tubes, like I was getting at, the cab could be slightly variation. There could be other bits. It's not like we're fixturing a full fucking trophy truck or something to where we know where all the main junction tubes are going to be at in space to appropriately do what you're saying even more accurately. Because we're not doing that, what you're saying is almost like more of a headache, because now the tubes, let's be perfectly honest, I mean, the Debertis did a phenomenal job, but even with that said, like, they're never perfect. So if you start tape measuring the truck side to side and things like that, even though everything was laser cut and bitchin', it's still going to be there's going to be variations in that.
And I think we intentionally didn't do any alignment tongue and grooves on the tubes themselves.
Yeah, these applications are done in a fashion that allow some of that on the fly adjustment. Hence, like, that's what I was referring to with intentionally making the bulkheads shift so that we can make everything work appropriately relative to how real life came out, because it never is perfect to the computer. Yeah. And we're talking small amounts. We're talking like quarters of an inch. And we're not talking like that it's out of square stuff. We're just saying that dimensionally sometimes stuff will shift. So to make it perfect and square, you have to fudge stuff here or there to get it all bitchin' relative to the computer. So the truck still drives bitchin' and straight, and it's totally safe. It's just there's these variations you have to account for in this atmosphere.
Well, and to be fair, they had way more experience building them by hand cutting all the tubes and ending up with a straight vehicle at the end of the day. So like,
as with a lot of people that we deal with,
where our service really just enhanced how they were doing it and really sped up parts of the build time for them.
And we're one of several. Like, there are other design firms that do what we do or specialize in what we do to some degree, and there's a lot of other CAD guys too that are very competent. So like, by no means are we the only ones. It's just in this sort of SEMA or promotional build fashion, this is just some of the like inside baseball and like what happens, and that, when you're walking around SEMA or you're seeing these sort of builds, etc., you need to understand that there's a lot of people involved, and in this day and age with the how CAD is and the CNC cutting and tube notching and all that stuff, like, we're able to do some really cool shit really quickly and get stuff done very accurately that we didn't have this ability 10 years ago. So most likely a lot of those builds you're seeing at SEMA when you're walking around are going to be designed by guys like us or a firm like ours in some way, shape, or form for said builder, for said group, whatever you want to call it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's, again, part of how we make a living, and other guys that do what we do. And we are hired guns for people that do these sort of projects. Now we can only do so much because, we don't have a million fucking hours in a day. And like I said, we only take on, so unfortunately we turn away a lot of work, but, that's just the nature of the beast to some degree. But yeah, we're going to do another one on the Forsberg car, because we're allowed to talk about that. So we have a marketing pack that we're allowed to showcase for that as well. And that was done after the Debertis. And that's just another good example of like another SEMA shred fest.
Yeah.
In this
that was a fun one. That's going to be a fun episode to go over.
Forsberg's is fucking unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely on the side of the table that would be unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not saying that the Deberti's was not unique. It's unique in its own form. But Forsberg was, and it also had some other challenges that were kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of not so fun figuring out.
It's just always fun to do something different, you know, like when just you know, you think like motorsports or a lot of this stuff's kind of all the same, but just like these small little details that creep up between preferences between like the performance truck and the Ultimaniac, it from a you know, design perspective, it completely changes how you're doing some stuff. Like you'll see a lot of similarities in the execution, but the reason for why they were done becomes completely different.
Yeah. Performance truck. There we go. Let's just see if they had any videos. Here's one. Yeah, so you can see some drifting.
Well, I do not know who they convinced to allow him to drift around their plane.
That was a promotional thing I think he did with BFG. Look at this. It's fucking Lou Ferrigno.
Yeah.
Yeah. He did purchase
the
their
Hulk
compound,
bought their house.
That is true. The compound.
The funny part was he was so like messed up from years of lifting and all of the like bodybuilding that it was Doug moving all the heavy stuff around.
Here you can see some of the degrees that we put in for this, making sure that the drift stuff was available for Brad. Yeah, man, there's a lot of good shots.
Yeah, and you can drive this car in Forza 5, I think.
Look at that picture.
Like Horizon.
That's pretty fucking gnarly. And Brad's not afraid to drive this thing. Oh, here you go. Here's some of the dirt-esque stuff. So here's what we're referring to. Here's a road race track he went on. Yeah. So there's some cool aspects to that. Here's a good interior shot. Yeah.
Oh, I think the color changed.
Yeah, that could be. We could have some technical difficulties.
I can fix it.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, well.
Not quite.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, here's another good shot of the front end. You know, you can kind of see that arm popping through there a little bit. And the bulkheads and the shock tower. So, yeah, once we got it all dialed in, this was Max shred that Brad wanted. But, yeah, it all worked out nice. So, yeah, there's good overview of some SEMA stuff, relatively speaking. And, yeah, just give you guys some inside baseball and some of the bullshit.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, on the actual TV show side, like, only a fraction of the actual build process can be covered on a 45-minute section with commercials.
Yeah.
So, you know, Brad's YouTube channel has a lot of behind-the-scenes coverage on it, too.
True.
I think he did a couple videos going over it, and then, you know, this kind of stuff and looking through the Instagram really gives you a better behind the scenes than the show can.
Oh, here's one of the arm fixtures. Yeah. We got some color fuckery on that cable thing, but whatever. Don't even sweat it. We're done. Yeah, I don't think we can beat this dead horse anymore. Here's some more of the arms I was referring to, with how they were welding these up. I mean, like I said, they shredded on this thing. They shredded pretty rad. But yeah, so that's it. Thank you for listening to a bunch of this fucking banter. And we will see you guys next time. This has been JEHC, episode number 4, Deberti Tacoma discussion. So, as always, gentlemen, pitter patter.